All right, so to pick up where we left off, we had just done a little bit with the admin page. So if we come into our polls and our admin, you can see that we registered our models. And if we go ahead and start our website again, just to make sure everything is running like we expect. There we go. There we go. So we got nothing here. If we go to whack polls, we can see we got a hello world. And if we go to our admin, you see we get our login. Obviously, I'm already logged in here, but otherwise you'd log in. And we can see our poll question showing up here. So we can click on questions. And we already set up this one. Who's your favorite instructor? And of course, it's there, right? All right. So with that all in there, let's go ahead and pick back up in the tutorial. So we talked about things like our date time fields and things that you may want with our admin page. There's a lot of cool stuff you could do in the admin where if I'm adding a question, maybe I want all of the options to immediately get added to that. And so there's a way to add those in so you don't have to add each individual one and then go back and add all those. All of our choices, rather, is what we call them. So we wouldn't have to add a question, then go add 4 different choices. We could do that all in line. There's a bunch of different options. So for now, we're going to go to part 3. And so part 3, what we're looking to do in this blog application, you typically have a home page. You may have some kind of entry or a detail, a year archive, month archive, day archive, etc. And in our poll section, we have like an index page, which displays the last few questions, a detail about a question, which displays the text and no results, but with a form on what to vote on. And then we have a results page that gives us the results for that particular question. And then we have a voting action, which handles that voting for a particular choice within that question. So we need to set up some views, if you guys remember right. We come out here and look at our views for our app. And you notice all we have right now is our index. We do not have anything to deal with setting up our polls or etc., right? So we need to add in this content to our views. Let's add it in here at the bottom. And this sets up a detail page with an HTTP response. We have a results page and a vote page. Notice these are not using templates just yet. It's just putting text on the screen, so to speak. All right. If we look at this %S, this is dumping in the question ID. This is based on the particular one that we're passing it when we do that. All right. To wire those all in, we need to do that in our URLs file. So we have a urls.py. Remember, views is where we're doing the logic. This is the logic that's going to happen when you go to the page, and then at the very end, it generally presents the page, aka in this case, it's using return HTTP response. Otherwise, it may be render template or whatever it may be. URLs is where we put the glue to run this function when you call for this page. All right. So URLs is the glue, so to speak. So we're going to copy that out and throw that into our urls.py. Remember, there's 2 urls.py. You have the one inside your app, and you have the one that is for your entire project as a whole. All right. Remember, the entire project as a whole knows that anything polls is then going to go to the polls URL. So that's the one that we're wanting to edit, which is this one here. And we throw in our views. So we have our path already. We have the views. We can take out that extra. We have our URL patterns. Before we just had an index. Now we have all this extra. So we're going to trash that one out too. So we have our index. Notice that it has nothing in between 2 quotes, which means if we just go to polls whack, that's where we're going to go. If we go to whack in question ID, results, or vote for those individual ones. All right. So when we look, we could see something like polls 34. That's going to pull anything with question ID 34. And then we can vote on that by going to whack vote, and we can go to whack results in order to get that out as there as well. So if we look in our database, if you guys remember, we just had our admin one. We have this question here. We would need to figure out this question ID, right? And it's probably 1 because it's the first one we added. But we can check that if we go out to our database. So if we go to our database and we connect it to our data source of SQLite, and we point it to our DB SQLite over here. file, 3 dots, and this is our Django tutorial and satellite 3. There we go. Update our driver. You guys may or may not have to do that. We can test the connection. And that tells us that we have connectivity to that database. So we can now hit apply and OK. And now with our database synced up with PyCharm, we can come in here, look at our main. Oh, give us our database. Is it not giving me the whole database? Come on. There we go. There's our tables, and inside our tables, we have a polls question and our columns, and we have an ID. And if we click on polls question and double click on that, you can see we have one in there with question ID 1. So that means if we go out to our website and we go to 127, come on, numlock, 127.0.0.1, 5,000. It's not 5,000. What is it?
8,000.
8,000, right? What's 5,000?
That's for
Flask. So 8,000, we got nothing here. We go to whack polls. We get our index page. And if we go to 1 after that, you can see we can get, you are looking at question 1. Now, obviously, it's not printing anything yet because we haven't updated it, but that is how that URL works. So we dynamically are taking in this question number. If we come in here to our views, notice how it's automatically pulling in that question ID so that we can plug the 1 in down below. That's how it actually got the text for 1. It pulled it from this URL. So our backend Django goes, oh, you're looking for this URL. That's a 1. I'm storing that as question ID, which then allows me to render that into my template too. So lots of backend glue going on there. Okay. And then if we go to vote or any of those, we would get other pages. Now, last thing we need to do is we need to go to our index, and we wanted to make it where we would see the last couple questions that would come through. And so if we look at this code, last question list, AKA we're going to create a list. We use question.objects.order by. What this does is this is pulling from the objects database. It's going to order those by the publication date. And with this :5, does anybody remember what that does with the list?
from the beginning to the 4th object, or well, I guess fifth object in the list.
Yes. The idea is that we're pulling the first, 5, right? From there, on this output, you'll notice that we're using a string, and we're going to use join and do a for loop inside of that, basically getting all the question detail out of there. And that creates a very simple text string that we're going to return as an HTTP response for now. Eventually, we'll get to a template, but for now, we're just requesting that. So we will update our views, and we're going to replace this index with the new one. And again, the idea behind this is going to allow us to interact with our questions and grab the last 5. Now at the top, we need to import our model for question. Notice how we have this red under squiggly. So if we go to the top, we need to grab our .models and pull question. And if all goes well, that squiggly should go away, which it did. And that allows us to do an update. So if we go out here, we go to straight polls, it pulls our last 5 questions. In our case, we only have 1 question in there. Right? Those are currently comma separated and in a deal. So if we added more questions, if we go back here to our admin and we go to questions and we go to add a question, and what is your favorite snack? We save and add another one. Oh, we got to set a date now, save and add another. And maybe we have something like, what is your favorite programming language? Now, save. Come back out here, we refresh, and we can see that we're getting all those comma separated. All right. So that all looks good, but it's better if we have templates and not just some comma separated goofiness, right? So instead of that, we already have a list coming back. Maybe we can just do a simple for loop and then kind of print each one of those questions out of the list. So here we're going to create an index template inside of our templates polls. Now notice this structure. It's a little goofy. You go to your polls app, you have a templates folder, and inside your templates folder, you have another polls folder, then your index.html. So you kind of got to follow this. Otherwise you get real lost real fast. So if we go into our polls, we need to create a templates folder inside there. Notice we have the outer one. We need an inner one. This is our templates. And inside our templates folder, we create another one called polls. And inside polls, we need to create that template style sheet, which is an HTML. And we are calling that index. And inside here, we're going to add that to our Git repository, grab all that and paste it in. And you'll notice this is using the template style of Django, and through here allows us to do Python directly in the HTML file. So in this case, we're going to use a simple if latest question list, aka if the list got returned something, then we will use an unordered list in order to loop through each question. We can do a list item, which gives us the question ID and the question text. Notice how it pulls that out. So in this question list, this is a list that's being generated by our index, right? Pulling it from the database out of here. When it pulls that question is now an object, which means we have attributes. You guys kind of remember that from 360. There's lots of things set to it. We have different things that we can pull from that. So question.id gives us the ID number, and question.questionText is whatever text that we stored from the database. All right. We can put that in an A reference, etc. in for. Now, if we do an A reference, what does that do for us? You guys remember your HTML?
That's a link.
It is. So we're dynamically building a link that will grab the ID and then the question text. And that question text is actually what's displayed on the page. If we click on it, it's now going to take us to /polls/ whatever ID was. AKA, it takes us to the detail of that ID. So we can use these templates to dynamically build out all the HTML code so we don't have to do it by hand. If we have 40 questions come in here, it dynamically builds a page for every single question. Okay. If there's no result for our latest list, we will get back the paragraph, no polls are available. Remember, inside these templates, you have to do an INF. We don't typically do that in Python, but when you're using Python in these templates, you have to do an INF. Okay, so if this works, the last thing we got to do is update our views. We no longer want that whole question mark thing, but what we do is want it to render that template. So we're going to come in here and go to our views. We're now going to replace this output with our template. We're going to use loader. Loader is a function that will allow us to load up that template. From there, in the context, we're going to set latest question list to latest question list, right? And then we're going to go ahead and render that template. So up at the top, we need to grab this loader function and add that to our template like that. And then we should be able to test this. We go out here, we go to polls and hit enter. And now we have a nice little list here. And if we click on one of those, it immediately takes us to, you're looking at question 3, question 2, question 1. All right. So when every one of these we click, it automatically builds the URL at the top. All right. Seems simple, but you just built a whole lot of glue so that you can dynamically build this thing out really fast. Okay. Now, a shortcut to doing this here, if you have this HTTP response, then you have to do a template.render, render that all to HTML text that you are then sending out to HTTP response. There's built-in shortcuts within Python. And so instead of doing HTTP response, we're actually going to use render, in which we take the request, aka the user's request of pulling for the page, and we pass in these different contexts. This is a whole lot easier to do. All right. So we're just going to update that text to a render, and that's better than an HTTP response. You can see that we have a whole lot less lines that have to be added there. Okay. Also, when you're using things like PyCharm, it's going to automatically tell you to use this as your template name and et cetera. So it tells you what needs to go in what spots. It's really slick. Okay. And of course, nothing changed. If we go out here to our website, refresh, nothing changed on the website. It's just a different way of rendering it. Okay. Now, right now, if we try to go out there, we need to raise some kind of 404. So if we try to go to a question that doesn't exist, say 20, and hit enter, we're getting your question 20, but there is no question 20, right? We only have 1 through 4. So we need to tell it to render a 404 if it can't find what's going on when we go to that page. So we're going to update our detail to raise a 404 if that question doesn't exist. So let's update detail. We're going to try to get that question from the database, right? If that does not exist, then we raise a 404 with text that says don't exist. Otherwise, we go ahead and re-render all that information for that particular question. All right. If that worked, and now we go to 20 and hit refresh, we get a raise 404 name error, right? That is getting an error here because we don't have this raise 404. What is that? Notice how it's got the red squiggly. We need to import that in order to use it. So at the top, we use Django. Actually, both of these. And we need to render that up here at the top. So we go there, there. And now we have our 404 module in order to render that page. And if that works successfully, we can refresh. And now we at least get a 404, that page doesn't exist. Now we're seeing this because we still have debug equals true in our Django settings. If we go set that to false, then we'll get a standard 404 page, right? Or we can do a modified one. Right now, it's at least giving us some details as to what's going on. Anybody got any questions on 404 stuff? Last thing we need to do is just render out a template that posts the questions. That'll get us started. So we'll copy this out. We need to go back to our templates. We want a new template called detail. And for here, we'll add it, take all that out and just render the question for now. And if that goes well, we can go here. Let's go to 1, for example, and hit enter, and it renders out that question. Now we needed to have choices, but we haven't done anything for choices yet, right? Okay. We used a 404 here, right? We had to do this try and accept and then raise a 404 if it doesn't work. There again, Django has this really cool shortcut called get object or 404. It's basically doing that try and accept all in one, right? So it's going to try to get that. If it doesn't get it, raise a 404. In which case, this is a whole lot easier for us to code. So we go in here, let's go to our views. And instead of doing a try and accept in this whole rigmarole, we knock it down to 2 lines. We do need to import this shortcut of get object or 404, which is up here at the top. Oops, I think I grabbed too much. There we go. So there's no right way to do this. I mean, you can use this module here for 404, or you can use some of the shortcuts that are built into Django. Obviously, using the shortcuts save you a lot of code. Right? It was clearly common enough that they built a shortcut for it. Okay. The 404 there's a bunch of other shortcuts we're going to use along the way. So we have our detail one, but right now all we're doing with our detail is just rendering that out to the screen. We need to actually have some code there that would look like this. So this one takes our question, posts our question text. We're going to do that in an H1, which is a big header, right? And then we're going to have an unordered list, which takes all of our choices, grabs everyone that's available, and then we're going to list that stuff out. So let's go ahead and grab that template. We'll update what we have here. All right. And the reason that we have choice, now we have question, right? We know question because that's the object that we searched out for, right? If you remember the way we set up our database, we have question as a table, we have choice as a table. Choices have a foreign key that goes back to question. So for every choice, they're always assigned to a question. Not every question is assigned to a choice, right? It's the other way. Does everybody understand how that works? If we go back and look at our models. So in our models, we have our question, which has our text and our pub date. Then we have a choice, and that choice is always associated with a given question. It's important to figure out the direction of this association. It's probably the hardest thing to get your mind around if you've never done database work within anything, right? It's just the idea of foreign key relationships. So you can have all the questions you want, but you must have choices that are associated with a given question. So when we do that, we can pull a question and then we can reverse look up all the choices that are associated with that. And so that's what this template's doing, is it's grabbing our choice set all, aka grabbing all the choices that are associated with this question ID, and then we can print that choice text out. So if we look at our model, notice for each choice, we have the association, we have the actual text of it, and then we have the votes field, which is an integer. So how many votes did this one get? Okay. So now that we have that, we still have to set up our choice stuff, right? So if I come here and refresh, I get my header, but I don't have any choices associated with this. So there's no bullet points down below. We look at the text and we inspect it. We look at our body. You can see we have this UL, but nothing got generated there because there are no choices yet. See that? Cool. It's important to know how to go troubleshoot this too. Like go in, inspect. You can see that this is here, but nothing got dumped in, which means if I was expecting it, I need to come in here and look at my detail and figure out why nothing happened on these lines. All right. Okay. So we want to remove hard-coded URLs and templates. If you look at our href for this one here at polls, and we look at our inspection on this, notice that we have a hard-coded href of polls/3. All right. We can build this more dynamically so that it can poll easier within Django. And what we do is we use this URL tag, and this URL tag allows us to build things out. So we built these out specifically called the polls app, but say we change that name later, we have to go fix every single template from there on out. Where here, if we use the URL, if we update that, it dynamically updates our entire project. All right. So we're going to steal this tag out here and update our polls URL so that it spits that out in the right path. Okay. So for this one here, we need to go update our template, index template. There we go. Kill this one and put in a new one, which now uses this URL function that's built into Django in order to build that. So that looks good. We need to go update our URLs to make sure we're passing it the right way. So let's go to our URLs. And then from there, we also need to make sure we're passing in our word specifics, right? So if you wanted to change something, you would have to add that in here. We're not doing that, right? We're just using this one here. So if we go to our URLs, and we need to update our detail page to look like that, which is the same that we currently had. Okay. This particular app or this application that we built only has one app built into it called polls, right? We can build multiple project or multiple apps within a given overall project. Where you guys will really use this is if you guys use other third-party apps inside your total project. So you may want to use something like Django Register, which has the whole registration system built for you. There's no reason for you to build it from scratch. There's a bunch of other apps that make that super handy for you. If you're uploading files or PDFs or something like that to your app, you can code it, or you can use a third-party module to take care of that for you. So in Django, there may be 5, 10, 20 apps, etc. You need to have a namespace between each one of those. If you look at our overall polls URL, we are using views dot for each one of those. And so we need to set our app name so that we know that this URL is dealing with this app. So if we come in here and update our URLs, and we set our app name here called polls. By setting that app name, it allows us to do all references for polls at that point, just based off using the app name. So we would change our index form to update that to use the correct one. So index, again, we can replace this. And we can now set up our details to look something like this. So I grabbed the wrong one. I copied that. Like that. Now we have this polls detail. So notice in this URL before, it just had detail. Now we want to make sure we're using polls as detail page. Definitely want to set up your namespace. Does anybody remember what Django namespace is? The equivalent for that was in Flask? What was the grouping of stuff in Flask?
Blueprints.
Blueprints. Yep, exactly. Okay. All right, so now we're into part 4. We're going to write a very simple form. You guys know this from HTML. You just set form action. What's nice about doing this within a template is we can dynamically build a form. So all the questions or all the spacing, all of that stripped off the database and all the questions that are in the database, right? So in the database, we have a question and text and all that. It dynamically writes the HTML. Yeah.
I have a question.
Yeah.
How are you able to get these URLs in the HTML to like correctly work? Like I don't know, I get this error in PyCharm where it says missing like download module that asks me to download the module if I have like a URL I'm going out to that's using like some JS or CSS, and it asked me to download that.
Yeah, so if you are you creating a page or are you using the tutorial? You looking at something like this here where it gives you a 404?
Well, I have like a base HTML here, and I like link a URL for like a CSS library that I was using.
Okay.
And it still gives me that error. Like it only I think if it gives me options to load it in the browser, I think it still works, but I was just wondering why it like PyCharm tells me like why I need to download that like into the
Mike,
project.
it depends on how you're doing it. Are you linking it out to a live URL or are you linking it to where it's a downloaded CSS sheet?
I'm using a CDN.
Okay, if you're using a CDN, it should automatically pull it unless the URL that you're pointing to isn't working correctly or the URL isn't working correctly. That would be my guess. I'd have to see your error that you have there, Nikhil, but I'm guessing that's the case.
Okay, I think if you have time after class, I can show you.
Yeah, that'd work. All right. So again, we want to build our templates where they're nice and dynamic. So if we look at this one, we have our form that's setting this up. We're going to have to create a CSRF token. Does anybody know what that is?
What?
A CSRF token.
Nope.
Kinda. All right. So it's like a session token. Does anybody know what CSRF stands for? Use your friend Google. CSRF.
I would do that part of my life.
All right, so cross-site request forgery. What this does, if you guys were cybersecurity guys, or gals, you would know that cross-site forgeries are a way for us to attack websites and take your token when we submit stuff so that we can plug in our own data and submit that in. All right. So a cross-site forgery allows us to hack your website and steal what data you typed in and allow us to use your token to plug in our own data. It's a way of hacking a website. So by using a CSRF token, we eliminate that possibility of doing that. So kind of like what you were talking about when we were doing Flask, we could submit 100 different things, or we could submit 100 meg worth of text there, and there's nothing to stop it, right? Where this is going one step further to make sure that it is only one token per submission. So there's a lot of built-in stuff into Django that allows us to make sure we're secure, right? So we do our CSRF token, and then we set up field sets. So field sets, if you guys remember in templates, what that allows us to do is have options, right? It's just a chunk. It's a formatting technique. And then we can pull in our stuff here. We have legend, which is wrapping, which is a HTML5 thing. And then you can see all the different stuff that's pulled in. So let's go ahead and grab our detail here. And let's update our HTML for this guy. And so now we have a form. And so this is also setting up our inputs as radio buttons, so we can pick what choice. And for now, it's setting up things like a for loop counter that's allowing us to count how many times it's been through there, the value, etc., and the ID for that. So this all looks good. More explanation on this quick rundown. So that for loop counter is indicating how many times that for tag has gone through there. That is generating a number for you to pick a choice. Does everybody get that? So if there's 5 choices, then it's going to have options 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. If it's only 3 choices, it dynamically builds that for every time it looped through there. So we don't have to hard code any of that. That's the goal of Python, right? We don't want to hard code anything. Okay. Remember that we have 2 different ways of doing posts. So we can do a post or we could do a get, right? We post form information. We want to send it to the server at that point. We're submitting it. It's important because the act of submitting this form will alter data server side, not client side. Make sense? All right. So whenever you create a form that alters data server side, you use the method of post. It's not Django, it's not specific to Django. It's just good web development practice. You always want to post it. Okie dokie. In our URLs, we will look for this line here, which has our vote. So we need to set up our vote section, right? And so we need to create a view for us to be able to vote. So we come in here and copy this code for our vote, and then we'll take a little bit deeper look at that. This goes into our views.py. And there's our vote section. We're going to replace that with this. So with vote, we are going to get that question or die, aka send it a 404. We're going to try to grab a selected choice from this set. If it doesn't work, then that means that choice don't exist, or the one that we chose is a specific error. That's what key error is doing here. If it works, then we're going to, or if it doesn't work, we're going to render this and say you didn't select any of the choices. Right? Else means that we found our choices. We're going to add our count plus equals 1, and we're going to save this if we submit it. So remember, this first part is trying to get all this information. If that doesn't work, then we go, or if we're saving it, posting this information, we need to save our database. So we need a HTTP response, notice, or redirect rather. Let's go back and edit that. And so HTTP response redirect, notice that we're using the redirect to do a reverse lookup for our polls results, meaning we submit it to the thing, it saves it to the database, redirects us over to the page that actually has the results of our vote. So we're sending them to a new link. Notice that reverse is missing because we need to import that. So let's import that from our Django URLs. And what that allows us to do is, again, dynamically build our path using the reverse function and do a reverse lookup. So we're looking up for polls results. Polls results, we go to our URLs and we can see that we have polls and results. We don't have that. We need to build it. Okay. Which is here. So we need to add this to our URLs. And our URLs, we have that. And there's our next one there. Okay. And that's that last one that has our vote section. So it was there. We don't have the detail one. It's not showing up. Okay. So that's all looking good. Again, more detailed explanation here. I know I want to spend more time on this, but we're limited on how much I can cover in here. The goal is to get you through the tutorial, use that as a template so you can start working through your final project. Use this tutorial guide and this documentation religiously through your final project. That's the whole goal, is that you guys know how to read this documentation. Okay. Again, reverse is going to dynamically build this out for us, aka polls/3/results. All right. We need to have a results page that's in our views. So let's add that in. So remember, so far we have results. We need to replace that one with an updated one. And up that. Okay. So results is going to allow us to get that question and then render a results.html page. We need to build that. So if we scroll down here, here is the code for building our results. So polls, right click, new, HTML, results. Add that and paste. Okay. If we look at that template, it's going to show us all of our choice. Once we get our choices, we are going to be able to have the option to vote again by going back to that one and then voting again. Make sense? Mm-hmm. So we look in there, there's a couple cool things that were in there. So generic views, right now, less code is better. The detail and results are very, very short, right? And a little redundant. So we have an index, which looks very, very similar to those. So if we look at our URLs, you'll notice that these all kind of look the same in the path that's in there. We have the ability to set up these URL patterns that will automatically do that for us. So we can set up a page as a view, which allows us to dynamically build that when it comes through there. So as a view, as you can see here, you can build it out as a list view or a detail view, and that's already built into Django. So if we steal this code for our URLs and we replace that URL pattern, notice that it shortened it up a little bit and allowed us to use index view as a view, detail view as a view, results view as a view. Those are sending them back to the words that we used before. That's why you see those dynamically being built out of there. Okay.
So each one is split into a view and you can use that in the HTML?
Exactly. Yep. And then we just need to adjust the views so that it's actually going to render those out the way we want. So if we look at these class detail views, the benefit of using views is that we can render out the different templates and we can build out the text that would go in it. So for example, here we have this little function called query set, which will go grab those questions for us. So there's nothing wrong with the way we wrote this view in order to go search and go grab these questions. But if we do it as an index view, it allows us to compartmentalize everything down and grab that information when it gets more dynamic. So you can do it this way, or you can do the view way. Long term, the view way is going to be a little bit easier. And this allows us to use some built-in Django features to do that. So we need to copy this code up here at the top, and we'll add these detail views down. And that will replace our sections here that had index, detail, and results view. So let's look at those. We have index, detail, and results. And if we look at those, by passing in the model of each one of those, it will dynamically build the template for us based off that model. That's what the beauty of Django is when you built out that database, it's not just building a database, it's building subtext for each one of those things. So if it is a question or it's a question ID, right? That inherently has things like it's an integer. It's the primary key in the database. It links over to the choice options and we can grab. So there's a lot of reverse lookup stuff built in that way. That is the beauty of using views and rendering that. So like here, we have a function called get query set. It will go in and grab that same string that goes and returns it in, grabbing us the last 5 questions. Pop that into our context object, and away it goes. But you can write these either way, does not matter. Okay. So yeah, and Django allows you to do this based off the model that it's built into. All right. So if you want more information on views, come out here and view the view documentation. You'll definitely want to get through that. All right. There's a lot more forms and things that you can do with this. Again, this is just the tutorial. Go through the documentation if you want to do something fancy. All right. Let's see. Where are we at here? We still got 30 minutes. Let's check out part 5. So just like we did in Flask, there's the option of doing automated tests. This is going to do things like build out the pages. Does it, build a model? Does it return the things we expect? Does the site produce what we want? And so tests will save you time when you're building out your context without having to do a full-blown database. All right. So some basic testing strategies. You can do this from the command prompt where you create questions, you set in the date, time, and test it. You can create a test to expose any kind of bugs, for example, that were in here. So was published recently returns false for questions whose pub date is in the future. Well, it shouldn't have a pub date in the future, but if it did, we would have an issue. So we would need to fix that. Does anybody know why we may have something that showed up in the future? Time zones could be an issue. Yep. What would be another issue? Right along that way of time zones.
Like other countries.
You're close with your time zones. And time zones deal with what? First part of that word.
Time?
Time, right? So
Yeah.
what if server time got off and skewed?
Oh.
You don't have NTP running or something's not maintaining time. If the server time got skewed, now all of a sudden everything looks like it's in the future.
Oh,
You know what I mean? You're behind 3 days or something like that, goofy. Then it's going to cause an issue when it does a request on the database. So these allow us to catch those little weird what ifs. Should it happen? No. Does it happen? Absolutely.
it would also impact like Git and stuff, right? If you're hosting it.
Yes, absolutely. Yep. So this has a little test case. What you do is you create a test.py and you can create this test model question and you run a function here called test if it was published bad. And then we could see what goes on. And you can run manage.py for tests, run this against the database, and you get an assertion error. True is not false, which is saying that it didn't return like it's supposed to. And then it will destroy everything inside the database after it runs the test. All right. We're not going to necessarily run through this and the fixing bugs. If you are going to become a Django programmer, this is stuff you would want to do. But for the purposes of this class, I'm not having going through that side or do the testing on the actual view on this side. That comes back to the time zone stuff. So we can improve some of our views. For example, here we can look at this one where we pull the last 4. We might want to do something like time zone, like what you were exactly mentioning, right? So we go out to our views and we add the module time zone up here. And then we can modify this to make sure we're using the time zone of the user that's in that area. So we modify this return to make sure it's using the time zone of the person that requested. So that is this line, fixes that return. We don't need those extra spaced out like that. I don't know why it did that. So now everything is ordered by the pub date and the local time zone. This pulls it from the browser when it goes and does this search. And then we can also set our system to tell it what time zone it's in so it can do the comparison between it. All right. These are tests in order to create questions for us. 2-part questions, testing the view, idea for more tests. Testing's better, further test. Okay. So that's all testing. What I really want you guys to do is take a little bit better look at your program. So we click on this one, notice we get this little field set, but we still don't have choices for this guy, right? We would need to add in those options to do that. But we should probably add some in so we can get a better look and feel as to what's going on with our project. So to do that, let's go to our admin. There we go. And right now we imported question. What else? What other model do we need to import so we can edit? Our option, which was called choice, right? So we do choice, and then we need to register that with the admin site. So we plug this in and do choice. And that's a capital C, like that. All right, if we save that and go out to our admin section at home, you can see we now have choices as an option down here. All right, so with choices, if we go to add a choice, notice that this question only drops down to the questions that you asked. That makes sense? This is how that foreign key is built. So I can actually add a new question right in the Django admin. I don't have to go over here to questions and add a new one now. I can add one in here and then immediately assign it with this particular choice. But there's even better ways to do that where you add a question and maybe 3 or 4 choices right off the bat. That's an advanced thing that we're going to talk about here in, I think, Thursday. So for now, we're going to pick who's your favorite teacher. We need to have a choice option. Obviously, we're going to put the best one in there. And by default, votes are going to be set to 0 when we start, right? So let's add another one. So who's another favorite teacher? Let's throw in John. Add another one. Let's add in Kevin. All right. So we have our 3 choices. Those, obviously, as we add out more choices, don't associate back with a given question. So we may want to modify our view here later on to have this make more sense. In other words, if I add another choice, but this choice is what's our favorite snack, right? And we have Little Debbie's. And then we're going to add another one, beef jerky. And I don't know, pizza. It's not a snack. Can't be a snack. I tell myself it's a snack. Don't judge. Okay.
Could just send pizza rolls.
There you go. Pizza rolls, right? That's even worse because I can mow through way more of those than I can regular
God,
pizza.
Serving size 6.
Yeah.
My freaking.
Yeah, for me, it's a family of 6.
All right. So notice all these choices are running together and it doesn't really show what's associated with what questions. So that's the reason we would want to clean up our admin site a little later. For now, let's go ahead and add in some final choices. Favorite programming language. There's only one. But I guess we'll go ahead and add other stuff in here. It's not really a programming language, but for the sake of this demonstration.
I've yet to find someone who enjoys coding in HTML.
Let's add Ruby in there for fun.
I like how it looks pretty, but like you can't do a lot.
It's too human readable.
So if we now refresh our page, notice it pulled our choices and gave us bullet points, right? We choose Python, hit vote, and now we have our 3 choices and what our vote counts are. And if we want to vote again, and we go to Python and we just sit here and rack it up, now you're welcome to the US elections. I mean,
Oh, we're going places.
exactly, right? So we have a cool little website, but this is, rather generic. It doesn't look the greatest. If we come back out here to our polls, we now have what's our favorite snack. And of course, we're going to say Little Debbie's. Although for me, it's beef jerky, but Little Debbie sounds good too. We had some votes in there. Let's go to our 3. And, oh, is that the one I already did? 1, I think, was the other question. Of course, again, only 1 answer there. Let's add some of those in. All right. So at least we have some data in our database now. Again, what's nice is we can come out here to our database, go to our poll questions, and we can see that we have some entries in there. We can also go to our choices. Notice with these choices under question ID, those are 1s, 2s, and 3s. Those reference the question ID that's over here. That's your foreign key. That's how that foreign key works, right? So that's all good. And our stuff is working in our database. We are able to vote. Notice if we looked at our votes, our vote counts are up there as well. So we can see how that's going out. And good. So now we need to make things a little bit cleaner, right? So kind of like what Nico was talking about. That is right. That's how you pronounce that, right, Nikhil?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. He was talking more about having his own custom CSS and JavaScript because this is basic. Please don't turn this in for your final project, right? We need to have some flair to it at some point. So what we can do is set up some JavaScript, some CSS, but to do that, we have to do a directory called static. And that static is where we serve up static files. This may be images, JavaScript files, CSS files, etc. within our project. So we go to our polls, and we are now going to do a new directory called static. And that is where we would house those files. So in this case, we would have something that has what's called static finders. This goes through and grabs all of our apps and grabs all those files and serves them up for us. All right. That isn't really relevant necessarily for what we're doing here, but if we were to publish this on the internet, we would have to actually host those files in order to be doing that. And you may host those static with your project, or you may use something like a CDN, which he was talking about for his CSS. We may want to pull that information down there as well. All right. So static file namespacing is just another way of us putting that static file that we did. So for example, let's create one called style CSS in our polls. And under static, we also have to have another folder called polls again. And inside there, we can create a style sheet. And this is called polls. And dump that in there. Oh, I'm sorry, it was style, not polls. I didn't mean to call it that. We can refactor, rename, and this is style. Okay. We also want to make sure we load that static file into our stuff. So if you guys remember when we did this in Flask, we had it in our header section, right? We used link and then pulled that in. This is the same way, only we need to call load static so that Django loads up our static folder. Then it knows where to go find that file inside here. So we'll copy this. What's that?
Oh, so you have to do load static first before
Yes, you do.
call.
Yep. Yeah, you definitely have to load static first. What that does is collect all those static files so it can be rendered out. So there at the top, we have our style sheet for it to pull that up. And notice we're not using a generic base template yet and then sharing that across all of them and extending out, which is what we should do. Eventually this template or this walkthrough, our tutorial will do that for us. For now, we don't need to. So this static tag is saying pull that from our static URL. What that does is build the URL for all your static files. So by using this static tag, it builds out the URL for that aref. Or href, not aref. Okay, so with that all in there, you'll notice down below, it should restart our server. And now, if we go out to our page, polls, we should get that in here, except I went to the wrong one. Now we should get our style CSS. Actually, let's stop it and restart it. There we go. Go to /polls. There we go. And now it's all in green, right? Super cool.
Oh, yeah. This is the future of tech right here.
If you want to do something for setting maybe a background image in there, we can do that within Django as well. So we can go to the style sheet and set our background for the body to be to some background image, whatever that may be. So if we go to our detail, right? Is it detail? No. Oh, this is just in style. Style. Set one up for body. And notice this is going out and setting up an images folder and our background. And that's doing that from our static folder. So we got to create a images and a background side. So if we actually do that, notice it's not actually doing this on the left. We would have to go grab some image. So let's go to Google. And yeah, we're going to steal this image. Nope, we can't. Let's do a pumpkin. And images, and for whatever reason, let's do a drawing. I don't know. I'm seriously just grabbing something here. Save image as. Let me throw this in a folder here real quick. This will be our pumpkin. All right. And here. All right, there's our pumpkin.jpg. We're going to copy that, come into our static and do a new directory images. Oops, that needs to be inside our polls. There we go. And inside images, we are going to paste in our pumpkin. Okay, and we called it background.png, so we need to edit this and refactor. Refactor, rename, and that is now background. Okay, that should pull that in. If it does not, then I need to put that in a different folder. But we'll try it out here. And that would be when we click on one of these and get the body.
Alright, where works for me on this page?
You got PNG versus JPEG.
Ah, good catch. Good catch.
Yeah.
There we go. Cool. Did we get fancy? Yay. All right. Yeah, it's really great there, right? Okay, so the next part we want to talk about, and I said Thursday, but we still have 15 minutes. So we want to modify our admin. Remember, I had to go into each one of those and create a new choice and then create a new question, then go back and create all the choices. That's ugly. There's a really cool admin feature, and I use this a lot in order to modify those. So when we go to our admin, we create what's called a question admin. By default right now, we are just bringing, let me close some of these out here so we don't have so many up. And notice all this time I have not committed and posted. Make sure you do not do that.
Could you? The humanity.
Make sure you commit often. Okay. Let's see. Admin. There we go. So right now we're just taking the model and we're dumping that in, and then we're registering that with the website. We want to create some specific admin stuff so we can do some cool changes in there. So for example, we are going to modify our question one so that when we actually look at the content of our questions, notice right now we just have the question here. We don't have the date that it was published or any other cool information we have stored. If we want to change that, we come in here and show our question admin, and we want to show the fields of pub date and our question text. So this will sort everything by the publication date, then show the question text after that. So we now remove this question because we're using a very specific admin page. And if I refresh this, shift refresh this, if I stop clicking on it and do it the right way, there we go. I actually got to stop it and kill it. Stop, start. Go to whack admin. And to our questions, still not showing up. Should be showing up. What'd I do here? 404 background images. I feel like I forgot a step. What am I missing here? No, that's correct. And that's correct. There is a way to missing something here. Oh, I know what it is. Need to log out and log back in. Log out, log in. And now I don't remember password. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Ah.
Oh, one of the classic.
Okay, so how do we fix that?
Start committing, doing.
Oh, you just have to clear out your,
You go see
clear your database.
Well, we can't go see our password because it's gonna be encrypted,
Oh,
right?
yeah,
If we go to here,
oh,
off user,
yeah.
we're hashed.
So, I mean, you could,
How did we create this user to begin with?
well,
That's like 90% of the answer I just told you. How did we create this user to begin with?
We're just gonna make another admin user.
We just override it, right? So to override that admin user, we can stop our program, come down here to the terminal. Does anybody remember the command we used for that? So
I need to have a reference text for this.
what's the main Python file we use for everything in Django? Python.
It's not index, but that's HTML. It's not. Oh, is it manage?
Manage.py, and then anybody remember the command?
Run clear or delete.
Or how did we create our super user before?
Add.
Create super user. Y'all are really overthinking her today. All right, so we create super user, JL Zeller, name's already taken, right? So how do we get that old one out of there? Well, we have PyCharm. We come up here, we click on this and hit delete. Yeah, you can come in here.
Like it's a couple more clicks than that, but still.
Normally we should be able to go out and actually trash it. Let's see here. But for whatever reason, it's not letting me trash it because usually that's all we got to do. Well, let's create another super user instead. All right. I am now JL Zeller admin. Email address jlzeller@fhsu.edu.
It's gonna say duplicate email address.
Shouldn't.
Okay.
It's only pertinent to the username, if I believe. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yes, it's a bad password. I know this. Let's do it. Okay. So that's up and working. We can start our server back up. And now we are the on whack admin. And we are the admin. There we go. And we can go out to users. And now, because I'm a super admin, I can go back and actually change this one if I wanted to. But what we care about is questions. And it's okay. So we have this option. And it's showing our question text up here. Okay. So that's what our admin did. You can see if we go to admin, we have our fields of pub date and question text. Okay. What that does, and it was doing it before, I just wasn't explaining it correctly. So I was wanting it to change the order that it shows it here, right? I wanted it to show pub date. That's not what we just did, but what we did when we click on this one, notice what it did was put the publication date entry first, then it shows the question text. So it's the order of which it's going to ask the question of these is what this is doing here. It's a list, right? It's ordered. So it's going to do publication date first and then question text. If we reverse that, put that here and save that, then I refresh. Notice it's the other direction now. So it allows you to specifically put the order that you would fill this in. All right. So let's go back here and put that back the other way. In other words, you would always fill out the date and time first before you would actually write the text. So let's refresh that. There we go. Now it's cool, but like we said, it'd be really nice if we could add our choices every time we add a question. So what you can do is use a inline or a field set for that. And if we come here, we could go to our question admin and we look at our field sets. We have a none, which sets that by default. We have our fields, which is our question text. All right. And then we have date information. Notice how date information is now in a little subheader, which then deals with the date time information. So it allows us to modify our admin page so that when we're here, we want a subsection that deals with just the date time stuff. All right. Doesn't make a whole lot of sense the way we're showing it here, but as you have way more things inside your model, it allows you to cleanly edit this page up and take advantage of the admin, because now you're not having to code all these pages, right? You simply do some tweaks and next thing you know, you've got it built out for you. So when it comes to an admin side, Django is huge. That's where I would use that over Flask, is if you want to be able to go in and edit your database and add information, etc., having a whole blown admin side is handy. And all the features of an admin, sub users, they can only create this, they can log in and add that kind of stuff. So with this
oh, sorry.
No, you're good. Go ahead.
So with Django, you can also like, I think connect any database you want, right? Is that possible?
Yeah, absolutely. Right now, we're just using the SQLite database within this project, but you can point it out to a Postgre database or a MongoDB database, however you want to store it. The beauty is Django obfuscates that. So right now I'm using SQLite. I can go in and change my settings file and go down to the database section. And instead of telling it to use this default of SQLite, I can import Postgre and tell it to go out to a Postgre database. Maybe it's one that's hosted on the internet, and it would go ahead and utilize that database.
Oh, okay.
Yep. And you can go out here and look at this documentation, and it'll tell you all the databases it supports. Okay, so now we can see data information, and it has all this data information down below here. We also want to add related objects, right? Like we said, we want to have multiple choices show up. So with our choice, and when we add our choice in here, oops, go back to choice. We have a choice. We're just adding one choice when we pop up here. It's not ideal of what we're trying to do overall. So if we go to our admin and we look at our question on our choice inline, what this does is allow us to have a choice inline option when we add our question. All right. So we have inline and then we have an admin. There's two different ones. Notice this is doing a stacked inline. There's lots of different options in here. We're just going to show you this one here. Let's go down to in our choice inline. By default, we have extra set to 3. So we want 3 choices immediately when we create this option. All right. We come down here and we have this option of collapse, and then we're going to add in our choice inline. So let's update that section. Look at that code. And so what that did is allow us to collapse all of our classes that showed up. It also allows us to add those inlines of our choice. And so now, what is your favorite? Let's go back to our questions. We click on programming language, and it has our 3 choices down below. And in this case, it added 6. So it starts with 3 and adds 3 extra ones by default. If it was a brand new question like add, it would immediately give us 3.
That's what you're talking about earlier.
Yep. So now I can add my question text up here. So what is your favorite NFL team? And then our date information, we can click show or not, right? We can actually hide this information now. That's what collapse did for us. And we would need to click date, time, etc. Notice my current browser is 5 hours behind the server time. So the current time zone that I have set up on the server is not using Central Time. It's using what?
What behind? It's like, yeah, is that Europe?
Greenwich Mean Time, but what's ours, right? What's our time zone? Central, which is how many hours from GM?
Well, 5.
Right. So why is it saying 5? It's really what? 6, but what's going on right now? Daylight savings time. So that's why it's starting off. And this can get super hairy when you guys are writing web apps. That's the reason I'm emphasizing this is daylight savings time, time zones, all of that can cause a lot of issues. Django has that stuff built in to fix that stuff for you.
Guys.
Yeah, it's gonna be a pain to work with in Flask.
Yes, yes, it is. Now it has the ability, there's third-party modules that will basically fix it for you. But what's different is my browser, because even if my browser is off the wrong time zone, like I purposely set it to China and then access this, I can use that to test, which is really handy. So if I want to know why somebody in China is having an issue, but I don't, I can set my browser out to that time zone or my computer and then reference that back. Cool. So anyway, this gives us 3 choices now. So we could have something like Chiefs and say Vikings. I don't know. I'm making these up here. And the Lions. Then we can go ahead and hit save. And now we not only have that question pop up, but we obviously have those choices automatically got created here as well. All right. Same way with those. We may want to change that so that we don't have it stacked. Notice here, this is what stacked looks like. We have a choice text votes, choice text votes. Well, that doesn't look very nice. We can use something called tabular inline, and that is going to make it look more like an Excel fill out. So we can go to stacked inline, go to a tabular. And now when we add a question here, it looks more like an Excel sheet, easy to fill out and go from there. So it just depends on what you're doing and how many choices that you're adding in there. We can put it in. Okay, so that gives us 3. What other options is it doing this one here? There you go. So you can change the way this shows it, right? Right now it just has question, what's up? We may want to add that pub date. This is what I was talking about before. We changed what's called list display, and that puts the order of it is, as well as the publication date. So I come in here to my question admin, and before field sets, I put in list display. Back here to questions, and now I get my published date over here off the right. All right. Same way with choices. Maybe I want to know how many votes were over here automatically, or better yet, what question is associated with this choice, right? So we could change things like that. On the question admin, not only do we want question text and published date, but we may want to sort automatically by what was published recently, right? So we can adjust our list text to run the function of was published recently and only show the ones that are recent inside this admin. So right now it's showing all of them. If we just wanted to show those parts, we replace this. And was published recently. We refresh. And time zone not defined because we need to set that. So when this was published recently, this is a function that we need to call out. So we need to add that to our space in order to do that. Which was here. So under our models, we need to create that function, which was published recently, sets our time zone, and then we do a delta day of 1. So if it was published in the last day, it's in there. We need to add all this information under our model in order for us to get that order. So by default, we're going to set that to true. We're also going to set our default ordering to the publication date. And then the description is was published recently. We are building a drop down for a sort. So if we come back here, there would be a question. Of course, it's going to crash again because it doesn't exist. But we want to build a sort option like here. Action, delete these choices. We could set that we wanted it to publish recently. So we need to modify our model in order to have that option. There's our models. And we do that in our question text here. Yep, we need to undo that. So we're going to change this, paste this one in. Oops, don't take out our actual folder there. There we go. And now we got an admin date in this one here. Oops, and don't take out our string. Sometimes I do too much. There we go. And so now we have that in there. And this is not supposed to be tabbed in one. So shift tab. There we go. Okay, and this admin is not finding the reference, so we need to make sure we import our admin model up at the top. There we go. Now we can reference that. We need a double space to fix that one. And we also need to know what is time zone. So does anybody remember the time zone import?
TZ, date one.
Yeah, we'll just steal it from views, right?
Yep.
Model, import time zone. Okay, we also need date time. So I don't think that is there. We just need to import date time. Yep. There we go. That fixes that reference so that we can get our time delta of 1 day. Now we can come back here to our admin, refresh, questions. There we go. So notice over here, now we have this cool little green check mark, X check mark as to when it was created. Notice what was your favorite instructor? I did that back on October 17th. That was not within the last day. Therefore, we have an X on that. These check marks show that it was published recently.
Okay.
So this can be cool if you have a Boolean field in your table that's true, false. You can use that to show and display this correctly. And by default, Django puts this as a check mark or an X if it's a Boolean, which is what this is doing. Right here, Boolean equals true by default, and it will display it if it is true. This text here, description to publish recently, that is the text that gets showed up here at the top. And I can use this as a filter now. If I click on this, it would sort by that or publish date or whatever we want. So lots of cool stuff you can do in the admin. In our list filter, we can set it by our pub date. That will set it to default to do that filter. So if we go to admin in our question, notice we have list display. We can have list filter. And now we get a filter over here on the right. And this allows us to sort within today, 7 days, etc. So this is a really cool filter that we can do right off the bat. Again, one little tweak in our, and we have a whole bunch of functionality now within our admin. So really go through the documentation. There's a lot of cool stuff to add in there. Same way with search fields. Say we want to search by something in particular. Notice that we currently have no ability to search up here. If we want to add that, we add in search fields, and by default, we say our question text. And now we can go and search for a particular question. You can do things like pagination. You can add in different filters, date hierarchies, all sorts of cool stuff in there. All right. Let's see. We talked about our templates. When we did our project templates, notice we have our background and we had templates within our individual apps. So we may need to add those in. So if we add those in, we need to add this DIRs option, which is going to allow us to add in subdirectories into those templates. So we go to our settings file. We go to our template section here, and we have this already in here, but we need that in there. I don't know why it did a line like that, but there we go. So that takes care of that. And then app directories is true. So that's all in there by default now. And we can organize our templates, blah, blah, blah. Let's see here. So if we look at this templating, right, we have Django administration up here. If we want to change the look and feel of our admin interface, we can overwrite some of our stuff. So for example, we could change some code here that would say something like polls administration when it popped up. We would need to create a template file that would do that for us. So none of the Django's default admins can be overridden. To override a template, you do the same thing with base site.html and then copy the directory and build those all out. So if you guys want to override, you have to build out all templates kind of thing. All right. Last part here that I want to, oh, actually, we're out of time. So that's good. This is going to take us to other applications that we may want to add in. And the one that it's going to talk about is the Django debug toolbar, which I actually have a link in here and how that works. Super awesome to play with when you're working on your Django stuff. So we will pick that up on Thursday. And from there, we will get a mini project going as a template just to get you up and going. But that should get you everything you guys need. I believe part 8 is the last one. Yes, it is. So we will talk about how to do that. And then we'll go through the advanced tutorial a little bit before we start in on the other side. Anybody got any questions? You guys starting to come up with project ideas? Okay, good. So like I said, next week we are going to jump into the final project stuff, and just to kind of show you what that looks like. We start off with our outline, right? And so you guys will do this project outline, which is a 1-page write-up of what your plans are. It needs to tell me the concept, API that you're choosing and why, the framework you're choosing and why, and your plans for the actual project. It's not intended to be a full APA style paper, right? I'm just needing to know that you're on the right path so I can get everything up. You'll still format it. It's college law, but it's not a super heavy paper. Okay. The reason we're doing that is there is a section addressing instructor feedback of the final grade. This is me giving you that feedback. So you guys write the paper. I give you feedback if we need to tweak, change anything. That's the grading section that I use for the final project. And then after that, we go through a week to explore all the APIs you may want to use, and maybe it changes from what your Outlook overview was, etc. Some of you have already started working on this stuff, but that's what those 4 or 5 weeks there is to start really narrowing this down. For example, Django, great. I have a tutorial. You guys are going to go so far beyond that in your final project. You need a couple weeks to go research how to do that stuff. ChatGPT is your friend. I don't consider it cheating. You know, you want to add something, you can't figure out how to do it. Ask it how to do it. Let it give you the code. And then you use that code as a template to how to fix your app. Unless you dump in its entire code base, which is actually a thing you can do, by the way. Remember how you could tell ChatGPT to interface with Git? You could tell it to go to your code, and then how would I add it to that code? It's pretty cool stuff you can do. All right, we'll stop this recording.